pretty easy. There are few steps, there are few points you actually have to keep in your mind. The respective distance from the camera is because of atmospheric fog. You can see this point, you can see this, all of these areas are intersecting lines. What is up everyone, your boy is back again with another video. In today's one we'll be discussing about a pretty common problem among artists related to your conversion of line art from your sketch. So basically what happens here is that when you draw a sketch, it looks decent, but when you convert it into a line art, it looks flat, clumsy and unprofessional. So the problem here is that when you convert your sketch into a line art, most of the line detail is gone. Now, what is this line detail? In other words, all of the line variation or weightage is gone. Now, for example, when you draw a line during your sketching process, you make a lot of like these sketchy lines, which gives kind of a line weightage. For example, certain areas will be darker, certain areas will be lighter, but when you convert that into line art, most of these lines will be converted into just one single flat line. So instead of that, what we're going to do is we'll understand which area of this line will be darker, which one will be lighter, so that it adds that drama to the line. And to be very fair, it's pretty easy to add line weightage to your artwork. Pretty easy. There are few steps, there are few points you actually have to keep in your mind in order to do it properly. Now, few of these points which you have to keep in mind are: first, you have to make sure that you keep a note of your lighting and shadows. So while I was editing this video, I realized I spent an awful amount of time just explaining the point 1, which is based on lighting and shadows, because I'm dumb as fuck. So what we're going to do is we'll be taking this basic example of this water bottle. We have a sketch of my water bottle over here, and I will be explaining how lighting and shadow affects your line variation, or how thick or thin your line will be. For example, we have a light source at the very left side of the screen, and it is casting some highlights on the object, the bottle, from the left side. So what we're going to do is we'll make sure that every single line we'll be making at the left side of the screen or the left side of the object will be thinner, and sometimes not even existing over there because of the highlights, whereas the opposite side, the right side, which will have the shadow area, will have much more thicker lines. You don't actually have to go crazy with it. Make it subtle, but make sure that the difference is pretty visible. So yeah, I hope you understood this one. So the second point around which the thickness or thinness of your line is based upon is the distance of your object from the camera or eyesight. So basically what I'm trying to say is that no matter what the shape or the object is, if it's closer to the camera, for example, I'm talking about a scene. For example, this is the horizon and this is our shape, for example a prism, and let's make it a case if it was going like in this direction, and the more and more further it moved away from the camera to its farthest point, it will have like the lightest outline. So if it is in front of the camera, it will have like really thick outline. Then it will decrease. Then it will further decrease, so on and so forth. Now, the very basic reason why we are making our outlines much more thinner with the respective distance from the camera is because of atmospheric fog. So there is one thing which we all know, that there is fog in our environment, and the more the distance we cover from one point to another, the more this fog will increase, decreasing our visibility, hence the outline will decrease as well. So similar to the previous points, another factor that influences the thickness or thinness of your lines are intersecting lines. These are lines which intersect with each other, basically two or more lines, just like this. So if you just draw them like simple flat lines like this, it's not going to just create that visual bulk or that visual drama. So in order to insert that in your paintings or your illustrations, what you have to actually do is you have to find these intersecting lines, and according to where they are or in what part of the object they are, you're going to darken them at the intersecting points, just like this. Just make sure to don't overdo it. and it will make them look much more professional and much more cleaner. So if we jump back to our forearms character design, if you look at this, if you zoom in, you can see this point. You can see this, this, this. All of these areas are intersecting lines, where two or more lines are touching each other. So we try to make them a little bit darker than they're supposed to be. It kind of adds that effect of ambient occlusion to your painting. Obviously, it's a much more advanced topic. I'm not going to discuss it in depth in here. Maybe a different video will make it good enough for you to actually understand what ambient occlusion actually is. It's a much more of a 3D art related concept, but you can apply it in your 2D drawings and it will still work. So the next point which you actually have to keep in mind while creating your line art is the weight of your object, which is, for example, this mostly is used during the clothes when you actually are creating line art for your clothes. So for example, if you have a sphere and you have like a cloth wrapped around it, okay, so this is your basic cloth, this is your line art. So you'll try to find where the weight of the fabric lies, most of the weight where it actually lies. What's the flow of the fabric? So it's moving like this direction. This is where the gravity is pulling it, and hence most of the fabric is collected in this area. So this area will be much more thicker because it will have more weight. So you will make this area much more darker. The wrinkles will be darker here, whereas they will be lighter here. So the lower you move, the much more thicker the line art will be. So just like the previous example, I've made another one. This is basically your t-shirt, not t-shirt, it's your shirt, and you have all of these wrinkles. So what you're going to do is you'll actually find the area where most of the cloth actually is allocated. So for example, since most of the creases are over here, so this is where the most of the fabric or most of the weight of the object will lie. Hence what you're going to do is you will be making these lines much more thicker, and the further you move from this tension point which is generated over here, the lighter these lines will be. So it will be something like this, So finally, the second last thing which you actually have to keep in your mind while you're working on your line art is the outline versus your details. If you're drawing your cartoonic artwork or semi-realistic artwork, and if you're not doing any of that, I don't know why you're even here, because when you're drawing in realism, there are no outlines. There is no outline in realism. So what I'm trying to say over here is that if you draw anything, it will have two components of it. So for example, if I draw a cube, like this, so it will have two components. The one will be the outline, which will be always thicker than the insides or the details. Details will always be thinner in nature. So for example, if I had this a cube, and I wanted to add much more details into it, for example some random patterns or random holes, so these patterns will always be lighter than the overall outline of your the cube. So a good example of this is one of the carry creatures I drew of Ethan Becker. If you look at this, all of the outlines from the very outer structure to your insides, for example the jawline, are much more thicker than all of the facial details. Obviously it's very sketchy because, as I said, it's kind of my art style. So when you look at it, the inside details of the nose, of the face, of all of his jawline and all that kind of stuff, his neck, his chest muscles, his fingers, is much more lighter when you compare it with the outer structure. So always keep that one thing in mind, no matter what your art style is. Usually the thing you're going to go with is thicker outlines versus thinner details or inner details. So for example, if I choose the same brush with the same radius for my details as I did with my outlines, what basically happens here is that my image will start to look much more flat. It will start to look weird, and it's not basically good for your artwork. So always make sure that your line art, which is outside your object, versus the details inside of it, are of different diameters. Usually the outline should be much more thicker and the insides of the drawing will be much more thinner. Finally, the last one is the objectivity of your art style. So it really depends on your art style. If you want to keep your line art much more consistent and you like that flat approach, you can do that, it doesn't matter. Well, most of the artists use this kind of approach when they're drawing animation because they don't have enough time to add line variation. But it totally depends on you at the end of the day. I like to keep my lines pretty like dramatic, full of drama and inconsistency. So what I do in my art style personally is, first of all, I create a very basic kind of a sketch. Then I add kind of a detail on top of it, all of the necessary details that I need. Add a little bit of shading on top of it, cross hatching, doesn't matter. Then after I'm pretty sure that I like what I've done, instead of just erasing this entire layer and make another layer on top of it for my line art, what I do is I just start sketching on top of it for the basic outlines, so that I can add some sort of line variation on top of it. And now, instead of going from scratch all over again to create a line art, what I do is I just start polishing the line art or the basic sketch, not the line art I already have. So instead of creating everything from scratch and risk to lose all of the line details, what you can do is you can just start refining your sketch while keeping the outermost outline still there. As you can see in my Ethan Becker's artwork, most of the sketch is still there. I've kind of polished it and I've created an outline on top of it. If you look at this forearms one, there you can see is the basic sketch. And on top of it, for line variation or just give an illusion of line variation, I have added a basic cartoonic outline on top of it. It's pretty easy, it's pretty simple. You can just copy the entire process and on top of it you can add your own stuff because it's based on objectivity of art style. If you have a different art style, you can adopt different methods, it doesn't matter. So yeah, this is it for today's video. I hope you learned something new, especially if you want to convert your sketches into your line art. These are all of the points. And also, if you're new to the channel and looking at my face for the first time, do subscribe. You can comment down if you have any video ideas, comments or suggestions. I'll be really taking them from now on because I have all of this set up now. Previously I was kind of not active in the comment section, but now we'll be doing really crazy stuff. We might be making reaction videos, reacting to subreddits related to artists and all that kind of related stuff. But yeah, right now I need all of your suggestions, the crazy ones, what we can do with this face cam setup. So it can be a reaction video, it can be an art challenge, I have no idea. I'm open to everything, but not tutorials. I'm kind of fed up with these kind of suggestions. So do like, do subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Until then, peace.